I don't think their personal relationship has changed. I think the people advising the president have changed. We've built 30 years of a strategy of a stronger U.S.-India relationship. There are folks within the White House, perhaps within the cabinet, that have the president's ear that are giving him bad advice. The American consumer is upset. I think that's why you're starting to see him roll back some of these tariffs. President Trump's made some missteps. India is a country on the rise, one of the fastest growing economies in the world. That's the type of deal making that President Trump would probably see in a favorable way.
Hello and welcome to Tracking Trump on DeKoder. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Well, here we are almost at the end of 2025, and who would have thought that the India-US relationship would see such a roller coaster? At the beginning of the year, when President Trump took oath for a second time in the White House, Prime Minister Modi was among the first world leaders to visit Washington in February. And since then, we have seen a huge downward spiral in the relationship, with Trump's 50% tariffs on India, the highest in the world. And even though he says a trade deal with India is around the corner, there is no official word on that just yet, and we're still waiting to see the fine print. More importantly, what we're also seeing at this point is Trump going back on tariffs at home when the impact is really now being felt on American consumers. He's also faced significant electoral setbacks recently, and there are midterm elections due in just about a year from now. Now, what does all of this mean for the India US relationship? Our special guest on the program today is US Democratic Congressman Ami Bera, who is in fact the longest serving Indian American in the US Congress. It's been 14 long years. He joins us from Sacramento, California today, very early in the morning for him. Thank you very much, Ami Bera, for joining us. He and Republican Congressman Joe Wilson have recently introduced a resolution on India-US ties. It's a bipartisan resolution. It underscores the importance, the history of the relationship, what it has achieved so far, and why it is important for the India-US relationship to continue to grow and strengthen. Congressman Bera, thank you very much once again for being with us. I wanted to first ask you about this particular resolution and why you felt the need to push for this right now.
Thank you for having me on. As you rightly pointed out, it's been an up and down relationship over this past year. And when I was in India leading a congressional delegation in September, you could see how concerned the Indians were with where the relationship was. And talking to my fellow members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, nothing's changed from the congressional perspective. We've built 30 years of a strategy of a stronger U.S.-India relationship, going back to President Clinton, to President Bush, to President Obama, Trump's first term, and President Biden. So from our perspective, we thought, as a separate branch of government, members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, should send a strong message to India, to the people of India, the business, the government of India, that our strategy, our perspective of a strong U.S.-India relationship has not changed.
Is President Trump, though, listening to these voices from the US Congress? And I wanted to read out a line from the resolution which says, in more than 3 decades, it's been the policy of the United States under the administrations of President Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden to strengthen this strategic partnership. It talks about its importance to regional stability, democratic governance. But, I'm sure the State Department tells Donald Trump the same thing. Or do they? I mean, is he listening to anyone around him who's trying to tell him that don't mess this up, including you?
My concern is that there are folks within the White House, perhaps within the cabinet, that have the president's ear that are giving him bad advice. Because you've seen him take the H-1B policy, the $100,000 fee for H-1Bs. That was a very poorly thought out strategy, because as soon as they announced it, Secretary Letnick was having to walk things back. We've also recently heard President Trump on U.S. television, on Fox News, talk about the importance of having the best and brightest workers come to the United States, that we need that skilled work set. Well, his policy goes against making that necessary. So I think there are folks like Peter Navarro, others within the White House, that don't share the sentiment that the U.S. Congress does of a strong U.S.-India relationship, who may be giving the president bad advice. That's also part of the reason why we thought we, as members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, should give a strongly positive message that this is important. Hopefully the president will see that, will be able to engage in conversations, because again, nothing has changed from our perspective.
And how much support does the resolution have? I know you, I believe, have 24 congressmen and women who have co-sponsored it or signed on to it already. But in terms of broader support within the House, are the numbers good?
Yes. So we have 24, 12 Democrats, 12 Republicans. We have a few other Democrats that would like to get on. We want to keep the numbers even so it sends a bipartisan message. We've also started a conversation with senators to do something similar in the Senate. And again, I think that will get introduced probably after the holidays. We will continue to add co sponsors, but this is also a vehicle to get the Indian American diaspora engaged. What we're now going to do is go to the diaspora and say, take this resolution to your member of Congress and ask them to co sponsor this. Ask them to support a strong US India relationship. Again, nothing in the resolution is controversial. It doesn't speak ill about the president or anything else. It just talks about the importance of why US India matters.
You mentioned your visit to India when you were leading a delegation in September, and I remember that Congress MP Shashi Tharoor said that he had talked with you about, in fact, the lack of engagement from the Indian diaspora, what he saw as a lack of engagement on the issues affecting India, including the H-1B visas, the trade tariffs, etc. Do you agree with his assessment that the diaspora needs to speak out much more strongly on these issues?
I do. I mean, at this juncture, when I was first elected to Congress, I was the only Indian American member of Congress. We now have 6 Indian Americans in Congress. You see folks running for state office, local office, all around this country. So we've had so much success as a diaspora in business and medicine and technology. Now it's time for us to step up in politics. And again, most of the diaspora does want to see a strong relationship between the United States and India. H-1Bs disproportionately impact immigrants from India. There's issues like documented dreamers and others. This is a time for the Indian American community to step up and use their political muscle, use their relationships, and get engaged. That was also part of the thought behind the resolution. It gives them a tangible thing to allow them to go talk to their members of Congress and ask them to do something to support the relationship. So, I think this is a moment in time where the diaspora should step up.
What do you think stopped them from doing it until now? They're pretty vocal on social media, but why not be more vocal politically at home?
I'm not sure. And it's not a monolithic diaspora. So there's Democrats and Republicans. A lot of the diaspora supported Trump. I also think, something new is happening in Trump's second administration. You're seeing online the attacks on Indian Americans. I see it myself personally. And again, I don't think it's the majority of Republicans, the majority of Trump supporters, but there is a vocal group that is attacking Indian Americans. If we sit silent, then that will just gain voice. Instead, we should step up and we should push back.
I think that's an important point that you made. In fact, I've seen horrific sort of social media attacks on the vice president's family, his wife, etc. And so, nothing is off limits clearly in this age. But, again, your resolution, as you also have pointed out, also talks about the importance of people to people ties between India and America, which have traditionally been so strong. And yet, Indian students' admissions to US universities this year is significantly down. I saw one statistic that said it was down by more than 40% compared to the same time last year. How concerning is that for you if Indian students now look at maybe Canada, Germany, Australia, or the UK as alternative destinations for
I
their
mean,
education?
it hurts us. Like, I'm a beneficiary. My parents came to the United States in the 1950s to study at U.S. universities, as have generations of Indians. They've started their companies here. Some of the leading CEOs got their education here in the United States. It is bad policy not to allow those students to come study here. Part of that also is you've seen the rise of India's own domestic population. When I was in India in September talking to young people, they no longer have to come to the United States. They can certainly go to Europe and elsewhere, but they can also get their education in India. They can start their company in India because a lot of those products are being sold to Indian domestic markets. I also have talked to the University of California, my home institution, to say we should also bring our universities to India in partnership with Indian universities and Indian companies. The world is a much smaller place. I think that's also one vehicle how we can continue to grow people to people ties.
Are you also getting a sense that Trump's really misfired on the tariffs, overall, because he's just rolled back domestically the tariffs on important agricultural goods like coffee, bananas, beef, because clearly American consumers are now feeling the pinch when it comes to prices. So, do you think that he's starting to roll back because the real impact of the tariffs is now coming through?
Absolutely. We've been saying all along that these tariffs are not going to be good for anyone, and particularly they're going to hit the American consumer. I think he saw the election results of a month ago and saw how poorly the Republicans did in those elections, and whether it was New York City or Virginia or New Jersey, the whole topic was about affordability. And the American consumer is upset. I think that's why you're starting to see them roll back some of these tariffs, starting to talk about how to make healthcare more affordable. Again, I think he saw the writing on the wall that the midterms are a year away. Right now, it doesn't look good for his party. So I think he's starting to address that.
What is the challenge for your party, though, as you head into those midterms? Do you think that the Democrats will be able to sustain affordability as a key issue even a year from now? And even with Mamdani's win in New York, do you think the party is sort of ideologically kind of trying to decide which way it should go, more left of center like him, or or more centrist?
I think the affordability message, if you look at the governor's race in Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, who won by wide margins, is a moderate Democrat. She talked about affordability. Mamdani in New York, who's very progressive, talked about affordability. So I think if we're going to be successful as a party, it's not the message, it's taking the energy of the young people and tying it together with the policy of some of the more experienced folks. Again, I don't think the message is that much different in New York or Virginia or California. It's about how do we make life better for folks. It can't just be about being against Donald Trump. It's got to be here's what we will do to make your life better.
Circling back to the relationship with India, we had the former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan on this program a couple of weeks ago, and one of the concerns that he voiced was, apart from the tariffs as they stand right now, he's worried that we could be looking at tariffs on services like outsourcing, and that could really hurt India and the India-US relationship further. I believe there is a legislation that some are trying to move in the US House as well on this. How worried are you about that?
I mean, I'm worried. I think all of our energy should be actually getting a trade deal. It's always been elusive to get that US India trade deal. My sense, talking to folks within the administration and others, is we're not that far apart. And I would rather go to zero tariffs or much lower tariffs and have a trade deal in place. I do think there are individuals within the administration that really have an anti-Indian view. Again, folks like Peter Navarro have publicly stated as such. I think outsourcing tariffs is going to again be detrimental to the U.S. consumer. So, I think it's going in the wrong direction.
Um, Whatever happens now, though, do you believe that the India US relationship, though, has been significantly damaged by Trump's actions over these last few months? And will it take a long time to repair that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think President Trump's made some missteps. We've spent decades dehyphenating India and Pakistan. They're not equivalent countries. India is a country on the rise, one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Pakistan is a country that faces multiple challenges, including its own domestic terror threats. Um, so, some of these are missteps, but I think they can easily be remedied. By all accounts, the president and the prime minister have a good working relationship. Again, I think it's important for us as Congress to reiterate that we, as members of Congress who have been here for a long time, very much care deeply about this relationship.
And yet, while you say that there's no hyphenation as you see it between India and Pakistan, by sort of inviting the Pakistani army chief to Washington not once but twice, and the way he's spoken of the Pakistani leadership after the Pahalgam attack, it's not gone down well in Delhi at all, has it? I mean, President Trump has really sort of scratched at very old wounds here.
Yeah, it doesn't go down well with me either. It doesn't go down well with folks in our Department of Defense and other members of Congress. Again, part of the reason why we are putting this resolution together, I hope the president's listening. I hope he's paying attention. We are not going to make multi-billion dollar investments in Pakistan. We are doing that in India. Indian companies are investing in the United States. We're not going to be defense partners with Pakistan. When I visited Western Naval Command, we're doing joint exercises on a regular basis with the Indians. They are partners to create peace and stability in the region, along with Australia, Japan, others. So our long-term strategy has not changed. It's with the Indian American relationship. Again, I'm not sure who's giving the president advice, but I think he has made some mistakes recently.
Well, if you had to, look into a crystal ball, how soon do you think we could actually have this trade agreement? You were saying that your understanding was we're not that far off now from having some kind of agreement. And in your view, what is an acceptable level of tariffs then against India? Here, it seems to be around 15%.
Yeah, I mean, 15% is much better than 50%, right? Which is not tenable. It will actually hurt American businesses as well. I think you're seeing, Japan, Korea, other places get to the 10, 15% level. I think that's fine. I also think, when I was in India, there's President Trump is transactional, and I sincerely think he wants to bring an end to the conflict in Ukraine. I think the Indians, this is a time for the Indian government, diplomats, Jay Shankar and others, to use their diplomatic skills to work with Russia to try to find a path forward. I think this is, that's the type of deal making that President Trump would probably see in a favorable way to say, okay, we'd like India to help bring this to an end. And I think those are the types of things that can help mend the relationship.
That's an important point you're making. You're saying that if India tries to help and push Russia towards a kind of a ceasefire with Ukraine, that would really change things with Trump.
I think that's the type of thing that President Trump would see in a very favorable light. I think, I hate to say this publicly, but, it may be as simple as the reason why he's rewarding Pakistan is they said they would nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize. I wish it wasn't that way, but the president does seem transactional at times. I know Prime Minister Modi can't do that necessarily, but what he could do, it's in India's interest, it's in the U.S. interest, it's in the world's interest. Work with us to help bring an end to the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
It's interesting you say, you talked about, the nomination for the Nobel Prize. In other words, President Trump, with him, flattery does get you everywhere.
I mean, that seems to be the case. So again, India is a major nation. The leader of India can't necessarily do the things that other smaller countries can do. But again, all indications are the prime minister and President Trump have a good relationship, and I would, look for the things that President Trump would consider wins.
And yet, despite that good relationship, as you put it, I think Mr. Modi has actually avoided running into President Trump. The couple of multilateral summits that he skipped in recent months, you just never know what Trump might say. But then coming, then to the last question on this, would you say then that Trump actually misread India completely and the reaction of Delhi on his tariffs and his threats simply because he repeated his claims about a ceasefire that he mediated between India and Pakistan? He's done it, I don't know, I think 50 times. Um, India has not gone out of its way to flatter him. Mr. Modi's not gone out of his way to meet him. So, in a sense, did Trump misread the mood in Delhi?
Yeah, I think so. I think folks around President Trump have given him bad advice. Again, part of the reason for going to Delhi and Mumbai in September was I felt I had a responsibility to try to reset from the congressional perspective that nothing has changed in our view of India. Nothing has changed in our view of Pakistan either. And I think that's why we worded the resolution the way we did. I would hope that we could get that to the floor, perhaps through the Senate to the president's desk sometime in the next year. I think if the president were to sign a piece of legislation like the resolution, that would send a very strong message. Um, Again, this is very different than the first Trump term, where you saw Howdy Modi in Houston and Namaste Trump in Ahmedabad. It's very different. I don't think their personal relationship has changed. I think the people advising the president have changed.
Well, let's see where this goes. Congressman Bera, thank you very much for joining us. Good luck with your bipartisan resolution. Let us hope that the White House is able to see reason. Thank you.
Thank you. Be well.
You too, and thanks very much for joining us this week. We'll be back next week with much more on Tracking Trump. See you there.